there are reports that progress is being made on the battlefield, both in terms of territory, in terms of casualties, including in senior leadership. Is that progress reflected in the outflow of Westerners, both Americans and Europeans, going to Syria to fight on behalf of Islamic State?
Yes, there's a reduction, but it's not shut off altogether. There are still people going there. There are less fighters, though, than there were previously. We are taking increasingly more effective steps to curb the travel, to affect the decisions that people are making. We have now many communications centers that are beginning to reach out to the world of to Islam, to counter the false narrative of ISIL and present to people what the realities are on the ground. Just the other day, 15 members of ISIL were executed in Raqqa, and we presume because they were trying to get out or they were not, buying the narrative. This is what happens. If you try to get out, they'll kill you. And in effect, you're a prisoner of this. We see increasing instances of fighters trying to desert or running away from their fighting positions, even as commanders are urging them to fight. So we believe we're making progress. ISIS is still a danger. It still has people it has positioned in countries over the last few years. And it's something that's going to have to continue to require our vigilance and our initiative for some period of time. But we are going to defeat and destroy ISIS, no question.
One of the things you point to is the appears to be effective use of social media by Islamic State. What are we doing to counter that? How do we measure progress on that part of the battlefield?
Well, that's a very great question, because we've been evolving in our understanding of the metrics of how you do measure it. But we have an increasingly effective group of centers in Abu Dhabi, for instance, in the Emirates. They've opened a center which is staffed by Arab-speaking clerics, communicators, people who get on the social media and actively counter the false narrative of ISIL. The Saudi Arabians are opening a major center which will draw religious leaders from around the world to help speak about the true Islam. So, it is a fact that ISIL mastered an early presentation in the social media that wasn't countered initially. Now it is being countered, and increasingly I think people are learning more and more about the lies on which their false caliphate is based.
A different part of the battlefield. In the wake of the attacks in Paris and most recently Brussels, some people have been concerned there hasn't been adequate coordination and cooperation among European security authorities. What's being done to improve that situation?
A great deal of work is being done. Even before the Brussels attacks, David, we had a team called a Foreign Fighter Surge Team that had gone to Brussels to work with their authorities to try to examine where there may be some gaps and where we needed to do better. We've had a number of meetings were scheduled again before the attacks for this month, in which our experts are going to work with them. But one of the things Europe needs to do, and we've talked to them about this, they must begin to do a passenger name record system on air flights and travel. And they need to have an early access screening system for some of those folks so that we can do a better job. Europe has not been where the rest of, well, certainly the United States is and other countries with respect to that tracking. And they've had privacy concerns. We respect them. But I think they're learning, as we did in America with 9/11, that you have to take certain precautions and you have to give up a little something to be safer.
Does that lacking on Europe's part on security pose a potential security threat in the United States, because people can come from Europe to the United States who haven't been tracked sufficiently in Europe?
In Europe, I'm talking about travel.
Yeah, but to what extent does that pose a threat to the United States? Because you have security problems in Europe that can be exported essentially to our shores.
Well, yes, but we have one of the toughest screenings and it's much harder to get across the pond, as we say, and get into the United States than it is to move from Syria into Europe.